Welcome to The Explainer. You know, every single government throughout history makes one fundamental promise. We will protect the value of your money. But what happens when that promise inevitably gets broken? Today, we're diving into what actually survives when the currencies we take for granted, well, when they turn into worthless dust.
Think about it. From the Roman Empire to modern-day Argentina or Lebanon, history just screams this one lesson at us over and over again. Financial systems don't just fail every once in a while, they fail consistently. It's not the exception, it's practically the default setting. People go to bed thinking their life savings are safe, and they wake up to find it's all become a cruel joke.
So, the real question we should be asking ourselves isn't if these systems are going to fail. History's pretty clear on that one. The real question is, how do you protect yourself and your family when they do? When the money we all trust just evaporates, what's actually left? What has real, lasting value?
To get to the bottom of that, we have to start by tearing down the single most dangerous myth in all of finance, this illusion of permanence. We look at our dollars, our euros, our bank accounts, and we see a solid foundation. But history shows us it's more like a foundation built on sand.
And this right here is the absolute core of it. Money isn't some law of physics. It's not a rock. It's just a collective belief. It's a story we all agree to tell each other. And the scary part, that belief, that shared story, it can disappear literally overnight.
So if money is just a story, that makes it incredibly fragile. And that fragility leads us straight to one of history's oldest and most predictable patterns, the irresistible urge for governments to slowly, and sometimes not so slowly, destroy their own money.
It's almost always the same four-step playbook, a dance that's been repeated for thousands of years. You start with something solid, something people trust. Then, the government needs more money than it has, so it starts to cheat, printing more paper or clipping the edges of coins. Pretty soon, people catch on. They lose faith. And that's when the whole thing spirals into total collapse.
Let's look at a classic example, the Byzantine Empire. Their gold coin, the solidus, was the US dollar of its day, trusted absolutely everywhere. But over centuries, emperors facing debts started secretly mixing in cheaper metals. Little by little, the trust eroded, until the coin that had anchored the global economy was basically worthless.
And this massive gap between what a government promises and what it actually does, wow, it was on full display during the French Revolution. They issued a new paper currency, the assignat, and swore it was backed by valuable land. The reality? They just kept printing more and more to pay for their wars until it was completely worthless. Farmers literally started riots because they refused to trade their real, actual food for useless stacks of paper.
And don't think for a second this is just some old European story. It happened right here in America during the Civil War. The Confederacy printed so many of their grayback dollars that by the end of the war, a soldier getting his pay couldn't even buy a loaf of bread with it. A bag full of cash was just a bag full of paper.
Okay, so we've got this slow burn collapse from governments printing money. But that's not the only way things fall apart. Sometimes it's a sudden shock, a pandemic, a war, that acts like a giant high-speed machine that doesn't just destroy wealth, it transfers it from one group of people to another.
You see, whenever a huge crisis hits, society basically splits into two camps. You have the people with liquidity, meaning they have cash or assets they can sell in a pinch. They often come out of it even wealthier. And then you have everyone else, the people living paycheck to paycheck. Their wealth gets absolutely wiped out. These shocks create massive, almost overnight inequality.
I mean, check this out. It's the same story, just 700 years apart. During the Black Death, when half of Europe died, the survivors who had some savings could suddenly buy up land and businesses for next to nothing. Now, fast forward to 2020. When the world shut down and trillions were printed, who bought up all the cheap stocks and real estate? The people who had cash on hand. The mechanism is exactly the same.
So it's not just governments you have to worry about. Sometimes the biggest danger comes from the very institutions we're told are the safest, the most secure. We're talking about the too big to fail lie.
Let's rewind to the 14th century, to Florence, which was basically the Wall Street of its time. The two biggest banks, the Bardi and Peruzzi, lent a massive fortune to the King of England. Well, the king defaulted. And these too-big-to-fail banks, they collapsed like a house of cards, taking the savings of thousands of people with them and freezing the entire European economy.
You know, this idea that big means safe is a mistake we just keep making, century after century. It was true in Florence, it was true with Lehman Brothers in 2008, and it was brutally true in Lebanon in 2019, when banks just locked their doors and told people, sorry, your life savings are gone. Too big to fail is just a comforting story, until it's not.
All right, so we've seen how it all breaks down. Debasement, sudden shocks, giant banks collapsing. It's a grim picture. So, the big question is, what actually makes it through all that wreckage? Who are the survivors, and what can we learn from them?
And this is maybe the most important lesson of all. The people who survived these collapses weren't the ones with the most blind faith in the government or the banks. Nope. They were the ones who saw the cracks in the system, who understood its fragility, and who prepared for it to break instead of just hoping it wouldn't. And when you dig into what these survivors had in common, it almost always comes down to these three pillars. First, tangible assets, real stuff that a government can't just print more of, like gold or land. Second, essential skills, knowing how to do something that people will always need, like grow food or fix things. And third, having that strategic liquidity, the cash to be able to buy things when everyone else is in a panic and forced to sell.
And this is where we see the really mind-bending paradox of a collapse. For 99% of people, it is an absolute tragedy. It's ruin. But for that tiny group that's prepared, it becomes the single greatest wealth-building opportunity of their lifetime because assets get sold off for pennies on the dollar.
At the end of the day, the historical pattern couldn't be clearer. A financial collapse is fundamentally a massive transfer of wealth. It moves from those holding paper promises to those who hold real things. And the question history is asking every single one of us is pretty simple. When the story of money changes again, which one are you going to be left holding?